Listen closely. Do you hear it? That sound like silk being torn in a locked room. That's the sound of another nice guy discovering that his greatest virtue has become his most exquisite torture device. There's an old Romanian folktale about a shepherd who was so gentle, so accommodating, that wolves began following him everywhere. Not to eat him. No, that would have been a mercy. They followed because his kindness had stripped him of all scent of danger. He became invisible to them as prey, invisible as predator, invisible as anything worth respecting. The wolves would brush past him to devour his sheep while he stood there, smiling apologetically, explaining to the dying lambs that he didn't want to seem aggressive. You know this shepherd, don't you? You've been him, standing in your own life like a ghost at your own funeral, watching everyone take what they want while you hold the door open for them. The velvet prison isn't built by others. Oh, if only it were that simple. No, you've been both architect and inmate, crafting each bar from your desperate need to be seen as good. Every yes when you meant no, every swallowed protest, every time you smiled while something inside you screamed. These weren't acts of kindness. They were bricks in your cell wall. Schopenhauer wrote about the hedgehog's dilemma. Creatures who need warmth but whose closeness brings pain. But you've become something far stranger. A hedgehog who's filed down his own quills, who bleeds quietly in the corner while others wonder why you're so cold. You've made yourself so safe that you've become dangerous to yourself. Picture this. A man sits in a room full of burning candles. Each flame represents a boundary he could have set, a no he could have spoken, a moment he could have chosen himself. But he's afraid. Terrified that if even one person sees him blow out a candle, they'll think he's selfish. So he sits there as the wax drips down, pooling on his skin, each drop a small betrayal of self. The room fills with smoke. His eyes water. His lungs burn. But still he smiles. Still he endures. Because somewhere, someone taught him that his pain was less important than their comfort. Here's what they don't tell you about being chronically nice. It's not actually nice at all. It's a performance, a desperate theater where you play a character called the good guy, while the real you suffocates in the wings. Recent studies from behavioral psychology labs, those sterile rooms where human nature goes to be dissected, show that people who consistently suppress their own needs for others don't inspire love or respect. They inspire something far worse. Casual indifference. You become furniture in other people's lives, comfortable, reliable, and ultimately forgettable. The truly grotesque part, you know this, you've always known. Late at night when the performance ends and you're alone with the echoes of your own accommodation, you can feel it, that writhing thing in your chest that might once have been self-respect. But here's the sick joke. You're addicted to your own diminishment. Each time someone takes advantage, there's a perverse satisfaction in proving your own theory right, that you're only valuable when you're useful. I knew a man once, let's call him Marcus, though that wasn't his name, and perhaps he wasn't even real. Just an amalgamation of every nice guy who's ever existed. Marcus gave everything. His time, his money, his dreams, all sacrificed on the altar of other people's convenience. He dated women who treated him like an emotional ATM, worked jobs where his kindness was exploited, maintained friendships where he was always the one listening, never the one heard. One winter evening, Marcus stood in his apartment, bare walls, empty refrigerator, bank account drained from another emergency loan that would never be repaid. And in that moment of crystalline clarity that comes when you've given away so much there's nothing left to lose, he laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind that sounds like breaking glass. He realized he'd spent 40 years being a supporting character in everyone else's story. And no one, not one person, knew the color of his dreams. The ancient Greeks had a word, kenosis, self-emptying. But they meant it as a divine act, a god choosing to limit itself. What you're doing isn't divine. It's a slow-motion suicide of the self. Each act of unnecessary niceness, another cut in death by 1,000 accommodations. Here's your uncomfortable question, whispered like a lover's accusation in the dark. When did you decide your own needs were obscene? Which rejection, which moment of conditional love taught you that the price of acceptance was self-erasure? And more importantly, who benefits from you believing this lie? The velvet prison is comfortable, I'll give you that. The bars are soft, the chains are light, and your jailers bring you flowers and tell you what a good person you are. But comfort and freedom have never been friends. They're enemies who occasionally share a bed, and comfort always wakes up alone. Tomorrow, you'll have chances, a dozen, 100 small moments where you could choose differently, where you could say no, where you could set a boundary, where you could prioritize your own oxygen mask before helping others with theirs. But we both know what you'll do. You'll smile, you'll accommodate, you'll add another bar to your cage, because the prison you know feels safer than the freedom you don't. And somewhere, in a place that might be Romania, or might be the landscape of every nice guy's psyche, that shepherd still stands in his field, surrounded by well-fed wolves and the bones of everything he was supposed to protect, including himself. How virtue became a currency that purchases nothing but contempt. There's a painting I once saw in a dream, or was it a dream of a painting, where a man stood before a cosmic vending machine, feeding it coins made of his own crystallized tears. Each coin clinked with the sound of a good deed done, a kindness performed, a sacrifice made. The machine's display showed only one item: love, price, everything you are plus tax. And still the man kept feeding it coins, even as the machine's gears ground to dust, even as rust ate through its metal skin, even as it became clear that this machine had been broken since before time began. You've been standing at that machine, haven't you? Feeding it the currency of your niceness, waiting for it to finally dispense what you've earned. After all, that's how the world works, isn't it? Good in, good out. Karma's clean mathematics, the universe's fair exchange. Let me tell you a secret that will taste like poison until you learn to metabolize it. The universe isn't a bank. It doesn't keep ledgers. Your kindness isn't an investment. It's just kindness. And the moment it becomes an investment, it stops being kindness and becomes manipulation dressed in a saint's clothing. In 2024, researchers studying relationship dynamics discovered something deliciously cruel. People who approach relationships with a deserving mindset, those who believe their good behavior should naturally result in romantic success, activate the same neural pathways associated with entitlement and resentment. The brain literally cannot tell the difference between a nice guy keeping score and a narcissist demanding tribute. Both are performing transactions in a currency that doesn't exist. But here's where it gets truly grotesque. You're not just wrong about the rules of the game. You're playing a game that was never being played at all. Picture a medieval marketplace, thick with the smell of rotting vegetables and human desperation. A merchant stands there day after day, trying to sell empty boxes labeled good person points. He shouts about their value, creates elaborate displays, writes testimonials from satisfied customers who don't exist. The crowd flows past. Occasionally, someone stops to pat him on the head and tell him what nice boxes he has. But no one buys. No one ever buys. Because everyone else is trading in a different currency altogether. The currency of authentic desire, genuine connection, mutual choosing. And there he stands, growing old among his worthless wares, cursing the stupid world that doesn't recognize the value of empty boxes. Kierkegaard wrote about the sickness unto death. Not physical death, but the death that comes from living in denial of what you really are. You've been sick with the fever of deservingness, sweating out the belief that if you just accumulate enough nice guy tokens, the universe will finally pay out. But the universe isn't withholding payment. It simply doesn't recognize your currency. Consider the Japanese folk tale of the crane wife. A man saves a crane, and it transforms into a woman who marries him. She weaves beautiful cloth that makes them wealthy, but only on the condition that he never watch her work. Of course, he eventually does, discovering she's been plucking her own feathers to weave the cloth, destroying herself for his benefit. She leaves him forever, not because he broke a promise, but because their entire relationship was built on her self-destruction masquerading as gift-giving. You are both the crane and the man in this story. You're plucking your own feathers, weaving them into elaborate displays of niceness, then wondering why everyone who receives them looks vaguely horrified. They can see the blood on the fabric. They can smell the desperation in the weave. Your gifts come with invisible price tags that read, "You owe me love for this." Here's what the truly magnetic people understand that you don't. Attraction isn't a meritocracy. Love isn't a reward for good behavior. Desire doesn't give a damn about your moral report card. These forces operate on an entirely different physics, one of presence, authenticity, the courage to be disliked, the willingness to walk away. They're attracted to people who are complete without them, not to people who are auditioning for their approval. Last week, or last century, or in a future that's already past, a man told me this story. He'd spent 15 years being the perfect friend to a woman he loved. 15 years of midnight rescues, patient listening, thoughtful gifts. He knew her coffee order, her mother's birthday, the name of her childhood pet. He was the one she called when other men broke her heart. And after 15 years, when he finally confessed his feelings, she looked at him with genuine confusion and said, "But I never asked you to do any of that." She was right. She was absolutely, devastatingly right. He'd been depositing coins in an account she never opened, in a bank that didn't exist, expecting interest on an investment she never solicited. His niceness wasn't nice. It was a long con where he was both the grifter and the mark. The mythology of the deserving heart is this: that your suffering earns you love, that your sacrifice purchases affection, that if you just bleed enough, someone will finally be moved to stitch your wounds. But blood isn't currency either. It's just blood. And you're hemorrhaging for an audience that's already left the theater. So here's my question for you, asked in the tone of a doctor delivering terminal diagnosis. What would happen if you stopped trying to earn love and started trying to embody it? Not performative niceness, not sacrificial kindness, but the kind of self-contained completeness that needs nothing from anyone. What if you became the person who doesn't need the vending machine to work, because you've learned to generate your own sustenance? But we both know you won't. Not yet. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and check your nice guy balance, hoping overnight interest has finally made you lovable. You'll perform another act of unnecessary kindness, file it away in your mental ledger, and wait for the universe to settle its debts. And somewhere in a dream, or a painting, or the eternal now of every nice guy's delusion, that cosmic vending machine keeps accepting coins from men who never notice it isn't even plugged in. Why martyrdom feels like love when you've never known the real thing. Lean in closer. I want to whisper something obscene in your ear. Something that would make saints blush and demons nod knowingly. You're in love with your own suffering. Not the pain itself. You're not that honest. But with the story, it lets you tell. The narrative where you're the hero bleeding quietly in the corner. Too noble for this cruel world. Too pure for reciprocal affection. There's a moth species in Madagascar that evolved to drink the tears of sleeping birds. Think about that. Somewhere in the endless creativity of evolution, nature produced a creature that sustains itself on sorrow. But at least the moth is honest about its appetite. You've been drinking your own tears and calling it communion wine. I once found a letter in an antique shop, yellowed and foxed with age, though it might have been written yesterday or tomorrow, or in the eternal now of every man who's confused suffering with virtue. It read, "My darling, I have given you everything, my dreams, my dignity, my days. I have made myself small so you could feel tall. I have dimmed my light so yours could shine brighter. Why then, do you look at me with such disgust?" It was unsigned. Of course it was unsigned. It could have been written by any of us. The seduction begins early, doesn't it? Maybe your mother told you that love means sacrifice. Maybe your father demonstrated that a man's worth is measured in what he endures. Maybe the movies taught you that the more you suffer for someone, the more cosmic points you earn toward your eventual happy ending. And so you learn to associate love with pain, connection with depletion, intimacy with self-erasure. But here's the delicious irony that would make Nietzsche cackle in his grave. Your martyrdom isn't just unattractive, it's actively repulsive. Recent psychological studies on attraction show that self-sacrifice triggers the same disgust response as weakness in potential partners. We're still primates, you see, still wired to be attracted to strength, vitality, self-possession. Your bleeding heart isn't romantic, it's a biohazard warning. Let me paint you a scene. A man kneels in a cathedral made of his own ribs, praying to a god constructed from rejection letters. The stained glass windows tell the story of every time he chose someone else's happiness over his own. The altar is built from moments he could have said no but didn't. And there he kneels, day after day, waiting for someone to be moved by the beauty of his unnecessary suffering. But the only congregants are other martyrs, all too busy bleeding to notice anyone else's wounds. You know what's truly grotesque? The addiction to it. The way your nervous system has learned to interpret neglect as normal, rejection as comfortable, being chosen last, or not at all, as familiar as your own heartbeat. You've been marinating in your own martyrdom for so long that actual reciprocal affection would taste foreign, suspicious, wrong. When someone shows genuine interest, you recoil. No, your broken programming insists. Love is supposed to hurt. If it doesn't hurt, it isn't real. There's an old Persian myth about a saint who loved God so purely that he asked to suffer more, to prove his devotion. God, in infinite wisdom and cruelty, granted his wish. The saint suffered exquisitely. Disease, loss, betrayal, each agony more creative than the last. And with each new pain, the saint's love grew, until he was nothing but a writhing mass of devotion and agony. Other believers came to witness this testament to faith, and do you know what they did? They ran. They ran because they recognized something horrible. The saint was no longer loving God. He was loving his own suffering. He had become an Ouroboros of pain, forever consuming and regenerating his own wounds. You are this saint, except your God is the fantasy of eventual recognition. One day, you tell yourself, someone will see how much I've suffered for love and be moved to love me back. But suffering isn't a resume. Pain isn't a qualification. And the kind of person who would be attracted to your wounds isn't someone who wants to heal them. It's someone who wants to create more. Here's what they don't teach in the nice guy seminary. Healthy people are attracted to other healthy people. Whole people seek other whole people. The broken seeking the broken creates not a relationship, but a trauma bond. Two people using each other as bandages for wounds that need air to heal. But oh, how seductive the crucifixion. How romantic the thorns. There's a sick pleasure in being misunderstood, unappreciated, overlooked. It confirms your deepest suspicion, that you're too good for this world, too pure for its crude affections. You get to be both victim and hero in your own passion play, forever dying for sins that were never yours to atone for. Listen, do you hear that sound? Like nails being driven into wood? That's the sound of another nice guy crucifying himself on the cross of someone else's indifference, mistaking his ability to endure pain for proof of love's depth. So here's my riddle for you, posed like a sphinx blocking your path forward. What if the greatest act of love you could perform is refusing to suffer unnecessarily? What if your salvation lies not in being chosen despite your martyrdom, but in putting down the cross entirely and walking away whole? But you won't drop it, will you? Not today. The weight is too familiar. The splinters too much a part of your identity. Tomorrow you'll find new ways to bleed, new altars on which to lay your unnecessary sacrifices. Because somewhere deep in your programming is the belief that love without suffering is just friendship. And you'd rather be a martyr than a friend. In the end, the moths of Madagascar at least provide a service, cleaning the faces of sleeping birds. But you create the tears you drink, an endless cycle of unnecessary sorrow that feeds nothing but itself. When you've performed yourself into extinction, who's left to love? Once upon a time that never was, in a city that exists only at 3 a.m. in the minds of the sleepless, there lived a man who became so good at being what others wanted that he forgot he'd ever been anything else. They found him one morning, standing perfectly still in his bathroom, staring at a mirror that reflected nothing at all. Not invisible, you understand? Nothing. He'd edited himself so thoroughly that even light had given up trying to find him. But you already know this story, don't you? You've been standing at that mirror every morning, watching yourself fade a little more with each performance, each accommodation, each time you swallowed your truth to speak someone else's comfort. The human brain, that 3-pound universe of electrical storms and chemical tides, has a peculiar quirk. It can't sustain a performance indefinitely without beginning to believe it. Psychologists call it identity diffusion, when the mask wears the face so long that meat and porcelain become indistinguishable. But I prefer the older term, soul death, the quiet apocalypse where you become the ghost haunting your own life. Here's a game that's not a game. Try to remember the last opinion you held that might make someone uncomfortable, the last preference you expressed without first checking the room's temperature, the last time you said, "I want," without immediately following it with, "But it's okay if you don't." Can't remember? That's because you've been playing a character so long you've forgotten it's a role. In Japanese no theater, there's a tradition. The actor must become so empty that the mask can fill them completely. But those performers know something you don't. At the end of the show, they take the mask off. You've super-glued yours to your skull, and now you're surprised that kissing feels like pressing ceramic against flesh. I knew a man, or maybe I dreamed him, or maybe he's reading this right now, who kept a journal of every time he chose someone else's preference over his own. Small things at first, their restaurant over his, their movie instead of his choice, laughing at jokes he didn't find funny. The journal grew. Years passed. One day he opened it to find that between those lines of compromise, he'd written his own erasure. The pages were full but somehow empty, like a book written in invisible ink that never existed. The science is merciless in its clarity. People who consistently suppress their authentic selves show the same neurological patterns as those experiencing depersonalization disorder. Your brain literally begins to process yourself as other, as strange, as not quite real. You become uncanny valley to your own perception, almost human, but something essentially off, essentially absent. But here's the sick cosmic joke. While you're so busy being what you think others want, you're denying them the one thing they actually need, a real person to connect with. You offer them a hologram, a careful construction of pleasantness and accommodation, then wonder why their hands pass through you without finding purchase. You can't be loved if you're not there to receive it. Consider this delicious paradox. In your desperate desire to be chosen, you've made yourself unchoosable. You're like a restaurant that changes its entire menu based on each customer's perceived desires, never realizing that people come to restaurants for the chef's vision, not their own reflection in culinary form. There's a Sufi teaching about a stream that was afraid to cross the desert, fearing it would disappear. The desert whispered, "You cannot cross as you are. Let the wind carry you as vapor, and you'll fall as rain on the other side, still yourself but transformed." But you've been evaporating without the promise of rain, dissipating into nothing without the journey that gives dissolution meaning. Last night, in dreams or memory or the space between, I watched a man practice conversations in his mirror, not to improve his communication, but to perfect his invisibility. "How are you?" the reflection asked. "However you need me to be," he replied, and his image flickered like a candle in wind. He practiced until every response was perfectly calibrated to create no ripples, leave no impression, demand no space. He practiced until even his reflection gave up and went to find someone more interesting to reflect. The ancient Greeks had a word, kenophobia, the fear of the void. But you've developed something stranger, kenophilia, a love of your own emptiness. It feels safe, doesn't it? If you're nothing, you can't be rejected. If you have no opinions, you can't be wrong. If you want nothing, you can't be disappointed. But here's what the gods knew that you don't. The void doesn't love back. So here's your question, delivered like a summons to a court where you're both defendant and prosecutor. When you finally meet someone who says, "I love you," which you are they claiming to love? The performance, the absence, the careful nothing you've cultivated where a personality should be, and more terrifying still, would you even recognize authentic love if it arrived? Or would you reshape yourself into what you think it wants, thereby destroying the very thing that drew it to you? Tomorrow, you'll wake up and check that mirror again, looking for signs of yourself like a detective investigating their own disappearance. You might see a flicker, a ghost of who you were before the great erasure. But we both know what you'll do. You'll smooth it away, polish the surface clean, make sure nothing as inconvenient as a self disturbs the reflection. And somewhere in a bathroom in a city that only exists at 3 a.m., a man still stands before a mirror that reflects nothing at all, perfect in his invisibility, beloved by no one, especially not himself. What happens when nice guys finally stop pretending to be angels? The old woman lived at the edge of the world, where the maps surrendered to monsters and the monsters surrendered to truth. They said she collected the masks of nice guys who'd finally broken, row upon row of porcelain smiles, each cracked in a different pattern of revelation. When the wind blew through her cottage, the masks would sing a song that sounded like laughter and screaming, and the first breath of someone who'd been drowning for decades. I visited her once, or will visit her, or am visiting her now in the eternal present of every nice guy's potential awakening. She served tea that tasted like regret and honey, and she told me this: they always come here eventually, the ones who finally shatter, always at night, always bleeding from wounds no one else can see. They think they're dying, but they're being born. The nice guy must die for the man to live. And oh, how they fight it, how they cling to their cages even as the doors swing open. She was right. The most terrifying moment in any nice guy's life isn't rejection or abandonment or even loneliness. It's the moment he realizes he has permission to stop, permission to disappoint, permission to be disliked, permission to exist without apology. It feels like death because it is death, the death of everything false you've built your identity upon. But here's what they don't tell you about resurrection. It hurts worse than crucifixion. There's a species of snake that must shed its skin to grow. But first, it goes blind. Its eyes cloud over with milky film, and for days it lives in darkness, vulnerable and disoriented, rubbing against rough surfaces to peel away what no longer serves. Nature demands this temporary blindness, this voluntary vulnerability, as the price of transformation. You've been avoiding your shedding season for so long that you're suffocating in skin that stopped fitting years ago. A psychological study from 2024 followed men who underwent what researchers called radical authenticity shifts. Nice guys who finally, fundamentally, stopped performing niceness. The brain scans were fascinating. Neural pathways associated with chronic stress began to dissolve. New connections formed in regions linked to self-assertion and genuine contentment. But first came what subjects universally described as the terror period. Weeks or months of feeling like they were free-falling without a net, unmoored from the only identity they'd known. Let me tell you what happens when a nice guy finally breaks. First comes the rage. Not the clean, purposeful anger of boundary setting, but the accumulated fury of 1,000 swallowed no's erupting like a volcano that's been dormant too long. You'll say things you've been thinking for years. You'll burn bridges that needed burning. You'll be called selfish, cruel, not yourself. And they'll be right. You're not yourself. You're becoming yourself. Then comes the void. Without your performance to fill the days, without others' needs to define your worth, you'll face the terrifying question, who am I when I'm not being useful? The answer might be, I don't know. And that not knowing is the holiest ground you'll ever stand on. Some men fill this void immediately, with aggressive overcompensation, becoming assholes instead of nice guys, swinging from one performance to another. But the ones who sit with the emptiness, who resist the urge to fill it with another false self, discover something magnificent. Underneath all that niceness was a person. Flawed, certainly. Selfish, sometimes. But real. So blazingly, unapologetically real that others either flee or draw closer, magnetized by the gravitational pull of authentic presence. I watched a man, let's call him Phoenix, though he'd hate the melodrama, go through this transformation. For 43 years, he'd been everyone's emotional support animal. Then, one Tuesday, it's always a Tuesday when the universe decides to shake things up, he woke up and couldn't do it anymore. Physically, couldn't. His body rejected niceness like an organ transplant gone wrong. He lost friends, the ones who'd grown comfortable with his accommodation. He lost relationships, the ones built on his self-sacrifice. He lost his reputation as the good guy. But here's what he gained: the ability to sit alone in a room without feeling like he should be helping someone. The capacity to state a preference without apology. The strange new pleasure of disappointing people and surviving it. Most remarkably, he discovered that the people who remained, and the new ones who arrived, didn't love him despite his flaws and boundaries. They loved him because of them. His roughness gave them permission to be rough. His selfishness allowed them to be selfish. His humanity invited their humanity. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." You've been so busy maintaining order, keeping peace, smoothing surfaces, that you've forgotten the holy necessity of chaos. The nice guy is pure order, predictable, stable, boring as death. But the man you're becoming? He's chaos and order dancing together, sometimes stepping on toes, sometimes creating beauty that makes angels weep. Here's your final question, asked not as a whisper or accusation, but as an invitation to revolution. What would you do tomorrow if you knew, truly knew, that your worth wasn't determined by your usefulness? What boundaries would you set? What truths would you speak? What parts of yourself would you finally allow to breathe? The old woman at the edge of the world is waiting. Her collection of masks is vast, but not complete. Yours would fit nicely on the wall, cracked in its own unique pattern, singing its own song of liberation. She's patient. She knows that every nice guy eventually faces the choice: evolve or remain extinct. And somewhere, in a future you're already walking toward, there's a version of you that people describe not as nice, but as real. Not as good, but as whole. Not as selfless, but as self-possessed. He's terrifying in his completeness, magnetic in his indifference to being magnetic. But first, you have to die. The nice guy has to breathe his last accommodating breath. It's time, isn't it? You can feel it in your bones, this readiness for resurrection. The mask is cracking, the performance is ending, and on the other side of this necessary death, life. Messy, selfish, boundaried, real, disappointing, electric life. Welcome to your damnation. It's going to feel like salvation.